So we ready to start the live stream, fellas? Good afternoon. Welcome to the North of Tyne Combined Authority Cabinet meeting. We're here in Newcastle City Centre, but also available online for anybody who's watching, so welcome. Let's crack on. We have some apologies for absence. Mayor Norma Redfern is being deputised by Councillor Peter Early. Welcome, Peter. Councillor John Riddle is standing in for Glenn Sanderson. Carl Johnson has also had to put in some late apologies. So welcome everybody. Are there any declarations of interest? None that are not already on people's declaration forms. And let's move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. I've read through them, they seem all right to me. Is everybody happy with them? Champion. So that's agreed as a correct record. So before we move on, I just want to, and I'm sure on behalf of every member of the Cabinet, thank all of our teams in the local authorities, in the utilities and the emergency services for the terrific work they've done dealing with the damage from Storm Arwen, which has been extensive. Thankfully, we've not seen any loss of life, but it is something that's going to impact on people for a long time. So thank you very much for everybody and all the good work they're doing on that. So we'll move on to the first substantive item, that's item number 5, our adult education budget. This is an update of the first year. Of course, that was devolved to us just last year, and then a look ahead to year 2. So I'd like to invite Councillor Karen Kilgour to present this.
Thank you, Chair. So in August 2020, the Combined Authority took control of a £23 million adult education budget. In September 2020, we secured an additional allocation of almost another £1 million, and in April 2021, another 400,000 was delegated to us to deliver the Lifetime Skills Guarantee. So £24.5 million in our region to ensure our people get the skills that they need. And what makes this different is that we work with providers, we achieve outcomes that we as a Cabinet have set because we know our area and we know our people. We focus on our residents, their quality of life, their routes out of poverty and their ambition. We understand that one size does not fit all. Everyone's different, how they learn and what they need to change their lives for the better. And of course, it's also in an ever-changing market that we locally can understand and adapt to. The success of our adult education budget is outstanding, and I'm delighted to ask Lee Mills, our Head of Inclusive Growth, to present the work so far. And also, I'm very pleased to recommend the report to Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Lee, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Kilgour, and thank you, Cabinet, for inviting me to provide an update on the devolved adult education budget. The Cabinet report does provide a significant amount of detail regarding how the funding has been invested and the difference that it's making to people's lives and our economy. And in this presentation, I'm just going to pick out some of the key areas for your consideration. So following the direction provided by you as Cabinet, the devolved adult education budget has been invested to maximise the ambition set out in the NTCA Strategic Skills Plan. We're working closely with adult education providers to ensure that a high-quality adult skills offer is available, which focuses on helping residents to improve their quality of life and also ensuring that North of Tyne employers can access residents with the skills that their businesses need to grow and thrive. Next slide, please. I'll try not to say that every time. So as set out in the Cabinet report and as mentioned by Councillor Kilgour, for the first year of devolution, we took control of £24.5 million for the adult education budget. All of the funding was allocated to providers. And the chart in the left on the slide here shows how the funding was split between grant providers and procured contracts for service, and details of all of the providers and their individual allocations are provided within the report. Devolution of the adult education budget has allowed us to move from a system of numerous providers working in competition to fewer providers actively engaged in local collaboration with an agreement to address local need. Providers have implemented innovative plans to ensure that delivery continued during the COVID restrictions, and this has included transferring provision online, supporting vulnerable learners through one-to-one video calls, and where classrooms have been able to open, delivering to groups of learners with effective safety measures in place. If I could just bring you back to the previous slide, thanks. Okay. So on this slide as well. So in spite of COVID impacting delivery from the start of the academic year, over 25,000 enrolment opportunities were delivered during the academic year 2020-21. And the establishment of effective working relationships with the NTCA providers really proved invaluable in monitoring the impact of the pandemic on AAB provision. And in partnership with the providers, we've worked hard to shape delivery to ensure that adult education is being delivered in line with what our communities and businesses need during the pandemic and also into recovery. So in response to the feedback that we received from providers, residents and employers, NTCA introduced a number of funding flexibilities, which is one of the benefits that we have, having the funding devolved to us. Devolution is enabling us to make some local decisions on the funding, which are relevant to our area needs. One of the flexibilities that we introduced included a fully funded non-accredited learning aim that can be utilised by all providers to engage residents in learning opportunities. And the purpose of this aim is to offer informal activities to improve learner confidence, mental health and well-being. And providers are funded to engage residents with this learning aim prior to progressing them to further learning. The low wage flexibility, this provides full funding for adults who earn less than the real living wage. The aim is to help increase participation in learning for those who wouldn't otherwise engage in learning, for course fees being unaffordable. But participation from employed residents was significantly impacted during the pandemic. So as a short-term response, we introduced another flexibility, removing the need for any employed resident to contribute 50% towards the cost of their learning, and that was to stimulate reskilling and upskilling during the pandemic. The COVID crisis highlighted inequalities across our region, with our most disadvantaged residents being impacted more severely in terms of health, digital exclusion and access to jobs and services. So in response to this, we extended the use of learning support to all NTCA providers, whereas prior to devolution, only grant-funded providers had access to a learning support allocation. So extending the learning support allocation enabled all providers to specifically address this disadvantage and remove barriers to learning. And then providers were also given the opportunity to carry any under-delivery against their 2020-21 allocation into their 21-22 delivery plans. And this option was introduced to reduce the risk of destabilising the provider base during the pandemic. There was incredible uncertainty due to repeated lockdowns and social distance and self-isolation rules. So this funding option has really just given providers and residents additional time to recover from the disruption, and has ensured that residents continue to have access to a wide range of provision as the restrictions ease. So the AAB also provides for free statutory entitlements to eligible residents, and it includes provision in digital, maths, English and English for speakers of other languages. And about a third of the North of Tyne enrolments were taken as these free statutory entitlements. Providers did report that learners whose first language is not English have been severely impacted by the COVID crisis and have been increasingly marginalised by a lack of digital skills to access information and support. So in response to this, digital skills sitting alongside language skills have been prioritised for these learners, and many more residents are now able to access learning and support online. First full level 2 and 3 qualifications for young people aged between 19 and 24 are also part of the free statutory entitlement, and these qualifications are really highly valued by employers, and they provide specialist skills in the NTCA growth and recovery sectors. As detailed in the Cabinet report, we received additional funding from the Department for Education in April 21 to deliver the new Level 3 adult offer, which is part of the government's Lifetime Skills Guarantee. And the Level 3 adult offer enables adults without an A-level or equivalent qualification to undertake a fully funded Level 3 course, which directly links to employer needs. So the Level 3 qualifications that NTCA residents have been enrolling on to date include gas engineering, adult social care, residential childcare, work supervision in the construction sector, counselling and understanding mental health. Devolution has enabled us to work with providers to address the balance of low-level non-technical provision to ensure that there's more progression opportunities to the valued provision at level 2 and above, and to increase the number of residents gaining those higher level qualifications that are usually used as entry requirements into good jobs. And 46% of the courses were delivered at level 2 and 3, compared to just 36% in the previous academic year before the funding was devolved. The subject sector area of preparation for life and work, which is in the chart on the right of the screen, that accounts for 42% of all North of Tyne enrolments. And this provision includes ESOL, functional skills in English, maths and digital, and also as well as routeways into employment in vocational areas such as health and social care, hospitality, warehousing and construction. Digital enrolments also increased to meet the increased demand during the pandemic for digital skills for access to online activities, but also in response to the increasing need for digital skills to be able to access employment. Devolution of the AAB has provided an opportunity to make commissioning decisions on an area-focused and forward-looking basis. We want to improve the impact of AAB in the NTCA region, and we'll continue our approach to strategic relationship building and partnership working to develop localised, flexible, high-quality provision that responds to the needs of our employers in key sectors such as health and care, digital and green growth. And this slide just demonstrates the link between some of the qualifications that the devolved AAB is funding to the key sectors that NTCA is investing in for inclusive economic growth and recovery. 67% of enrolment opportunities were taken by residents who are unemployed. And during the first year of devolution, we've been working hard to gain a better understanding of the barriers that residents face to learning opportunities. The NTCA providers, they established a wide range of provision to support unemployed residents back into work. And on this slide, it just demonstrates more of the qualifications that are being funded by the AAB to support residents into work. Sector-based work academy programs, so these are a 6-week program for people who are receiving benefits and are aged between 20 and 25. They're developed in partnership with employers, providers and the DWP, and they provide the learner with a pre-employment training opportunity, a work experience placement and a guaranteed job interview. And these sector-based work academy programs are funded by AAB. And in the NTCA area, they've been co-designed with employers who have got job vacancies in areas such as contact centres, construction, social care, hospitality, installation of fibre networks and rail engineering. So this slide just provides an overview of who has engaged in the learning funded from the devolved AAB. And it's encouraging to see that a significant proportion of our investment is being accessed by those who need it most. And we aim to continue to extend the reach of learning opportunities to traditionally underrepresented groups through stakeholder engagement and co-design. Targeting areas where deprivation is high is a key priority in the NTCA Strategic Skills Plan to ensure that the investment is reaching residents most disadvantaged in terms of poverty and skills. The delivery data that was analysed at ward level revealed that 69% of enrolment opportunities were undertaken by residents who reside in the top 20% of deprived wards in North of Tyne. And there are some amazing case studies in Appendix 5 of the report, just setting out the difference that the devolved AAB is making to people's lives. So just moving into the second year of devolution, and as set out in the Cabinet report, we've received a total of 25.1 million for the academic year 21-22. So this funding has already extended the existing contracts to provide continuity and stability. We've still got 1.6 million left to allocate. So with input from providers, employers and stakeholders, options regarding this unallocated AAB are being considered and proposals will be put forward for approval early in the new year. So in line with the published priorities for the devolved AAB, this slide sets out our ongoing commitments to develop improved analysis of learner journeys, to remove barriers to learning, to better respond to employer skills needs, and to keep funding in the skills system to enable rapid recovery from the pandemic. So I hope that's been a helpful recap of some of the key areas in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Lee, thank you very much for that. There's an awful lot in that report. Would anybody like to, first of all, ask any questions or make any comments on it? Nick, Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Jamie, and thanks for a really informative report. And as you say, behind all the statistics in here, and there are lots and lots of facts and figures, are thousands and thousands of stories of people who have either increased their skill level or got a job, or in some cases got a job for the first time. And I think that demonstrates the real value of having this work devolved to us. There are just 2 or 3 questions I want to pick up, some of which may be obvious to answer in terms of the report. But firstly, Table 2, by far the biggest number of enrolments by local authority are in Newcastle. And I wondered if that's, the next paragraph talks about targeting it particularly at lower super output areas. I wonder if that was the main reason for that, or if there were other reasons like how we'd marketed it or where providers are, or that kind of thing. So it'd be good to get a sense of that. Secondly, Table 5 talks about the statutory entitlements, and there's a very high proportion of ESOL in there. And the text refers to supporting particularly asylum seekers and refugees in Newcastle and the wider region. I guess the question I've got is, are we providing services that actually should be provided by the National Asylum Dispersal Service in terms of language skills? Because it would seem a huge shame if we would devolve the budget and the responsibility here, but actually it was being soaked up by statutory responsibilities that the government isn't providing. And then looking to the future, part of the reason why, and big part of the reason why we were very keen to have the adult education budget devolved to us, is so that we can start to more closely align it with the ambitions more broadly around the economy and where employers and the in particular the private sector want to go in terms of skill levels. It'd be good to get a sense of what conversations are starting to happen with that broader family of employers, so that we can make sure that we're starting to fine-tune and align the adult education budget to meet the future needs of the region's employers.
Thanks, Nick. Well, I saw Robin indicate, and then we'll go back to Lee.
Thank you. So as the voluntary sector ambassador to the Mayor, just wanted to say how great it is to see Action Foundation in Newcastle and the Cedarwood Trust in North Tyneside represented there. I was lucky enough to spend some time with the Mayor at Action Foundation a couple of months ago, learning about some of the work they're doing around some of those basic skills and digital literacy, and also working in North Tyneside, and as a resident in North Tyneside, regularly see the impact that Cedarwood Trust have. So yeah, lovely to see the engagement of the sector, and long may it continue. And I guess, yeah, just to reinforce the importance of that lead-in time to allow the sector to generate the ideas and build the capacity to be able to play their part. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Lee, I don't know if you want to answer any of Councillor Forbes' questions. Obviously, if there's specific detail, you can give a written response later.
Thanks, yeah. I think on the enrolments, just to take the first question on Table 2, the enrolments, a lot of that is where there's a significant population and the carryover of learning from taking control of the devolved adult education budget. we're really pleased with the spread of across the whole of the north of Tyne, but I think obviously that was the first year of devolution, and we've now got the data to really understand where is learning across the area. What we now really need to do is go on that that journey of recognising, does that absolutely meet where all of the needs are? That sort of comes back to some of those, what are some of the barriers to learning? And whether that's to do with location or accessibility. So we're really starting, we're going to need to get into the further detail behind those numbers. But really great to see the spread. It's a really great continuation of learning that's happened before. So we've managed to keep that continuity going. So we're really pleased with that. But yet we need to sort of see how that matches to where the demand actually is. On table 5, the ESOL provision, it is a free statutory entitlement, the ESOL provision for AB, so we're absolutely delighted that there are residents who are accessing the funding on ESOL, and we've been working really closely with the provider base on ESOL to really have that joined-up approach to what the provision is offering. Coming back to that point I made about fewer providers working in collaboration rather than in competition. Not long before we took control of the devolved adult education budget, there was reports of really long waiting lists for learners accessing this vital ESOL provision. And we've worked really closely with providers to work collaboratively so learners aren't facing those long waiting times to access the provision. I suppose as with all funding, it's important to understand the context of how the other funding is, where it's available across the area. Is it available in the area? What are the proportions? And I'll definitely need to look into that into more detail and get back to you separately in terms of to be able to give that nuanced picture of what's the difference of the funding from the adult education budget compared to other ESOL funding that's available.
Really helpful also, if you don't mind, see if there's a gender difference.
Yeah.
Because that might say something about how people access.
Absolutely, yeah. And we do have that data, absolutely, yeah. The employer needs question, absolutely. Again, this has just been the beginning of the journey, and because of the first year of the devolution and the pandemic, it's put a real different spin on the plans that we had in place for really working closely with employers. So that will only increase, and it's got to increase. It's absolutely got to be the case of we're working hand in hand with employers and recognising that some residents have got a different journey to get into employment and get into those good jobs that are available, but that there's a real clear progression path, and that's certainly where those conversations with employers have started, but need to continue as we are working out what this recovery looks like and how we can make sure all residents are absolutely have the skills they need for those jobs.
Thanks very much, Lee. Karen.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted, it's just a comment, I just wanted to thank Lee and her team for all the work that's gone into the report itself, but everything that's happening behind that report. I know it's been a really difficult year because of the pandemic. Obviously, you've had changes in cabinet members and things as well. But I think the work that's been done is absolutely tremendous. I know that you are flexing and reacting to changes in the market, which perhaps we didn't anticipate 2 or 3 years ago. So really it was just to place on record my thanks for the report, for the work and for the support you provide as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. I mean, just to echo that, I was going to say this at the end, but what a time to get something like adult education devolved. You know, none of us obviously knew when the pandemic was coming. So we're at the first lockdown, and then by September it's all starting again. People don't know where they're going to be in, are they going to be out. And I know the work uni team were doing to very quickly work with providers to say, how can you move this online? You know, what elements of it can we make COVID proof? And to have increased the number of enrolments by 10% over that period, that's phenomenal. Well done. Richard.
Thank you, Jamie. This is obviously a really important part of making sure that we're fit for the future, and the key to everything that we do at the North of Tyne. You know, we're bringing in jobs and investment, but it'll be as to nothing if we don't manage to get those that are in most need of training and skills into a good place to take advantage of those jobs. Looking back at the report, it kind of looks back, of course, and in terms of what you've succeeded and the accomplishments that we've made. Can I ask, are there any areas where we've had lack of connection within specific communities, areas that we need to target and home in on in the years to come? And coming out of COVID, is there anything that we're going to be doing a bit differently, and can you give us a flavour of what we might expect into the future? And finally, just to reflect on, I think it was page 33, and one of the comments from one of the people who's gone through your training. I think we should always emphasise these points in these meetings. Work Complete training absolutely pulled me out of a horrible place and opened so many doors for me, massively appreciated. And it's fantastic to see that in this report, because I'm absolutely sure that that person will speak for very many others as well. Thanks.
Thanks. So yeah, I think in terms of, obviously the report for the most part is focusing on what has happened with the adult education budget. Now, the way that the budget's been commissioned and procured as well has ensured that there was absolute coverage across the area, and that every corner of the north of Tyne was accessible adult education budget. Again, that's part of going further into the detail behind the details, and recognising if there are further barriers to do with accessibility that we need to be addressing, and that will absolutely be as part of the priorities as we're coming into the second year of devolution. The data is kind of sort of hot off the press, I suppose, in terms of it feels like the academic year last year is already finished, but so we really are understanding what has happened, but next stage is and what hasn't happened, and how can we make sure that commissioning decisions are absolutely tailoring it to make sure everybody has actually got access to the funding. In terms of some of the coming into the next year and some of the additional priorities, just continuing to receive feedback from providers and employers and residents to understand if there's more flexibility that we could put in place with the funding to enable it to be more accessible. I think that's really what we're keen to make sure we've got that ongoing dialogue with all of the stakeholders to be able to put more flexibilities in place. Point of devolution is to be able to do something different with the funding and make sure it's skilling our residents with the skills that they're going to need to get into good employment. So we're working through what some of those flexibilities could be, and the ongoing dialogue with employers is absolutely a key priority coming into this next year.
Lucy.
Well, I'd like to add my footness, if that's such a word, that you've brought to us in such difficult times, and to see the impact already at an early stage is great, and to see just what we can do with devolved funding that suits our community here. I wanted, just wearing my hat as chair of LEP, the partnership obviously involves many of the business sectors and employers that you are working with, Lee, and want to work with others. If I can lend support around that, I think a presentation from you about this work and how effective it has been, if you haven't already, would be really powerful, because you talk with such conviction, such passion. I congratulate you for that as well. I think you will just get buy-in as you go along. But if I can help in this work in any way, very happy to do so. Thanks.
Thanks, Lucy. That's really kind. Yeah, I know obviously Lee and the team do engage very extensively, but I think if we were to do something showcasing the work we're doing at the North of Tyne, that'd be very welcome. Yeah, thank you. And I can't see anyone else indicating. So just, I think the final point to make on this, when Lee was saying that, the whole point of devolution is the ability to do something different. Of those enrolments, 4,865 have been community learning, and this has enabled us to engage directly in community spaces, not just in the colleges, including in places such as Alnwick, Amble, Berwick, Rothbury, Pegswood, Morpeth, Wooler, Hexham, Haltwhistle and Whitley Bay. So we really are getting out there and making sure all our communities get access to this. Lee, thank you very much. The entire team, the entire cabinet, I'm sure, would love to say, well done. So there's a couple of recommendations to note the progress which has been made, which we already have, so certainly no dissent on that. And let's just get this on the record to endorse the approach to managing the AEB delivery for the second academic year. And I can see lots of positive agreement from people there. Thank you very much, Lee. So let's move on to item number 6. This is the Future High Streets Challenge. It's certainly the case that we've all seen changes in our high streets before COVID, with a lot of challenges in terms of changing business patterns, in terms of people moving online and other things. And this is something that's been accelerated by COVID. And as the North of Tyne, we've pulled together an approach to this. Mayor Redfern, our Managing Director, Henry Kippin, is going to run us through this report.
Thank you, Chair, and hi, everybody. So really happy to present the report, which is there on page 37 of the pack. The report is self-evident, so I won't go through each of the sections, but will highlight a few points on behalf of Mayor Redfern, who's, of course, the portfolio holder and chair of our Housing and Land Board. First of all, it's worth noting this is one of those reports that is an article of collaboration itself. It's been very collaboratively developed. You'll see that in the authorship, which has Director of Regeneration for North Tyneside Council on there, but we could just as well have had colleagues from Newcastle and Northumberland, because as an officer team and as a Housing and Land Board, this represents a really collaborative approach. And the report essentially makes the case for a North of Tyne Future High Streets Challenge, quote unquote, which is about working with and across our 3 local authorities to address what are now quite a well understood set of issues around high streets, town centres, and if you like, to flip that on its head, opportunities to invest and support real change coming out of COVID. And it's worth bringing out 3 points, I think, now. First is around the diversity of our places. So you'll see in the report, as we often say, we are a mix as a combined authority of city, town, coast and country. It goes without saying we've had different experiences of COVID in our places. Our high streets and towns have different needs. So you'll see in section 1.1 and section 1.3 in particular, we set out some of those challenges. Some are common to places, and a range of lessons from the various task forces and reviews that have happened nationally over the last few years. There's been quite a few, 2 reviews, for example, from Bill Grimsey and an ongoing bit of work from government. As we speak, they have a high streets task force called Building Back Better High Streets, I believe, in progress. So the point to draw out of this really is that the solutions here and what we will be supporting will be bespoke to places and delivered in a very bottom-up way. Second, it's, I think, worth emphasising that this is about building on what works and what we are already doing, and you can see some of that set out really clearly in section 1.4. There's lots to learn from and build on already within the region. Mayor Redfern would want to point out work that's happening and happened in North Shields, Whitley Bay, places like Blythe, Scotswood. They're all examples of where you've got really strong local leadership that's making a difference in a place sense and working proactively with communities and showing that joined up strong leadership. So what we're effectively doing here is asking the combined authority to back those local models of change and accelerate them further. Thirdly, and lastly, the paper sets out, as I've said, a collaborative approach, hopefully in terms of the next steps. So you'll see those set out in point 1.5. They include the allocation of a capacity fund to help us to develop what is effectively a long-term pipeline and a degree of engagement and co-production in how we do that. And if you like, that mirrors the approach that we've taken around the economic value of the Northumberland line, the Tyne Task Force as well. It is a way of working that Cabinet has endorsed in the past, and Housing and Land Board is asking for the similar approach around towns and high streets to be put in place. You will also see oversight and support from Housing and Land Board and strong support from Mayor Redfern as a portfolio holder through the process. So I will hand back to you, Mr Mayor, for the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Henry. Does anybody like to ask any questions on this? Councillor Wearmouth, Richard.
Thank you, Jamie. So not really a question per se, but just an endorsement of the approach. It's something that I know that all of the authorities have done some element of, but having extra capacity from the North of Tyne really does add to our ability to move and get that first mover advantage, really. We know that there are sums of money that are becoming available or will become available from central government for further town deals, for future iterations of future high street and whether in however you term it, shared prosperity or whatever pot of money it's going to be. And those that will succeed in those funding applications are going to be the ones that are ready to go and have something that they can actually put in front of government departments in order to make rapid progress. So this is absolutely logical, complete common sense, and we should get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that final comment there. Let's just get on with it. Peter.
Thank you, Mayor. I know Mayor Redfern would want me to say that she's really pleased with the progress that's been made so far in relation to the Future High Streets Challenge. And in North Tyneside, we've also done a lot of work already in relation to some of our high streets, but we're always keen to take it further, and we've got plans to do work on further places like Whitley Bay and high streets in the northwest of the borough. So it's a very welcome report, and we're very pleased with the progress that's been made so far.
Thank you very much, Peter. Robin.
Thank you. Agree that the approach seems great, particularly welcome the community engagement and the leadership involving a range of partners. And I guess I just wonder what might be possible if, as part of some of this, we offer some new delivery points for the voluntary sector. We're starting to have some interesting conversations about maybe pop-up spaces where residents can come and learn how to use digital more effectively. So yeah, really interested to see how this might work alongside some of that delivery, and more than happy to be involved if that was appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and for that offer of collaboration there, Robin. I know you always do, but that idea feeds into the redesigning of places. It's no longer going to be the case that a high street is where you go, buy something and leave. You know, it is different models of footfall, and the things you're describing there fit with that very well. Lucy.
You've heard me say this before. I love sitting in this room because if I look over my shoulder there, I see Newcastle University, and if I looked over there, if there wasn't a wall in the way, I'd see my home at Northumbria University. And I think always, here we are right in the heart of that, a very vibrant student city that spills out not just into Newcastle, but to the other parts of our region as well. And Robin's comment about pop-up has made me look at the report again and think about innovation and high streets looking different. Both universities I've referred to have are probably the best in the country at student startups and setting up their own businesses. If it moves in higher education, it gets measured by government several times over. And as I say, both universities top the tables in this creative startup sort of world. And those measures are based on businesses that our graduates and undergraduates have set up on turnover, employability. So it's not just something that happens and disappears. There's longevity and sustainability to it. And I think involving the two universities and indeed the innovative colleges in our region around potentially pop-up to start with, but could be more permanent as well, is something that, again, I'm happy to talk to Mayor Redfern and others about. Because I think, you know, our students, we talk about the young, our students choose to make their home here for a period of time, and very many either come from the region or wish to stay here because we've been so welcoming and they see these opportunities. So just a word for them, please.
Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. That co-design approach is part of everything we do at the North of Tyne. And you talk of innovation there. In fact, Richard was talking about making this easy to leveraging government funding, as well as funding from the private sector and other places. And I'm particularly endorse the part of this that's looking at maximum use of our devolved powers, whether that's with mayoral development corporations or other things that fit in with, it's coming later in the agenda, the Green New Deal Fund, our Culture and Creative Fund. All of these are, you know, we have a very limited pot of money. What can we do to show that this is a viable business proposition? Because that makes it so much easier to get money out of central government if we can do that. So let's move to the recommendations. Cabinet's recommended to support the development and the launch of the North of Tyne Future High Street Challenge as described. And can I see some nods or thumbs up? Thank you very much. That's supported. Agree, this is a specific one, an allocation of up to £500,000 from the North of Tyne Investment Fund to establish a technical capacity fund, which is detailed in the report, and subject to the development of a business case to support this work. Is that agreed? And I can see all the Cabinet members nodding. And to authorise the Managing Director in consultation with the Investment Panel, Mayor, Cabinet Member for Housing, Land and Development to consider and approve the business case for the Technical Capacity Fund and authorise the MD to agree how the fund is deployed and how the next steps of the project are brought forward, all in one breath. Is that agreed? Thank you. So we're now going to move on to our investment fund update and funding approvals. And Councillor Peter Ellie has very kindly agreed to present this report.
Thank you, Mayor. Today, in presenting the investment fund report, I want to talk about levelling up. Irrespective of the government's comprehensive spending review, we in the North of Tyne are doing our own version of levelling up, because we're not just making the case for levelling up, we're doing it in relation to skills, health, education, jobs and transport, and we're making the connections and releasing the productivity potential that we need to. Whilst the local economy continues to recover from the pandemic and growth forecasting is more optimistic, and our benefit claiming count has fallen significantly over the past 6 months, the outlook remains variable. For the last decade, stagnant real wages have squeezed living standards. The economy is still not producing the quality of jobs people need to support their families, and despite forecasting what is predicted to be the next few months are likely to bring stuttering growth, rising inflation and widening income inequality. Having a job is no guarantee of stable, secure or sufficient income. Household incomes will be badly affected by a combination of lagging earnings growth, rising interest rates and tighter fiscal policy. As ever, the effects will be felt unevenly, with universal credit recipients hit the hardest. The double whammy of rising prices and the withdrawal of the universal credit uplift will lead to a doubling of destitution despite a reduced taper rate. Neither the recovery nor the increase in the minimum wage will be enough to make up for this squeeze, and the pandemic has exacerbated long-standing regional inequality between us and the South. We know that opportunity is not equally distributed. We know that life chances are determined as much by where you live as by who you are. We know that the fragile health and the health of your family can dictate how free you are to earn your living, to be independent, to have the power to choose your own path, to be who you want to be. Whilst the recent announcement of the improvement of our social security system for working families demonstrates the intent to turn the tide on the trend of rising in-work poverty, the reality is that millions of people who are unable to work or who are looking for work will not benefit from these changes. As the cost of living rises and deepens, the poverty for those out of work and bills and the weekly shop are going up for those residents who are out of work, face hardship, hunger and debt. So we must be the change we want to see in the world. We must ensure that no one who is able to work is out of work. Our focus on skills, on new jobs and the transition to the green economy is welcome, with opportunities for all in not just undiminished. It's greater than it's ever been. Our £18 million Green New Deal programme will be launched today, providing flexible and competitive finance to enable, accelerate and enhance low-carbon projects across North of Tyne. The fund will catalyse investment in the green economy, stimulate innovation and support supply chain growth. It's just a transition where, as the world changes, no one gets left behind. People want jobs, they want good jobs. They also want investment in social infrastructure, high streets, cultural activities and local regeneration. They are the key steps on the road to restoring civic and community pride and recover from this pandemic. The £15 million Access to Finance initiative is progressing at pace, with a programme set to unlock investment and jobs in SMEs and socially traded organisations. And the £1 million of additional funding for the events programme will ensure that events continue to play a key role in supporting footfall and economic recovery in our communities. Jobs, skills and the social life of our places. We are meeting the challenge of creating a fairer country. The projects I ask Cabinet to agree to today build on previous investment fund commitments of over 76 million, and I expect us to create or safeguard more than 7,000 jobs. If levelling up is decreasing inequality between places and between people, we are doing just that, and I recommend this report to Cabinet.
Thank you, Peter. There's a huge amount in that report. Do we have any questions or comments anybody would like to make? Richard.
Yeah, Thank you, and thank you for the report. Obviously, there's an awful lot of work that's going on across the programmes that are covered in this agenda item, and a lot of progress being made. When you, it's interesting, and for all of the things that ultimately face us in terms of challenges, we should reflect on a relatively low unemployment rate in the North of Tyne area, which is pretty much shadowing the average in England, which is no mean feat when you consider that historically we would be way out in the distance in terms of how we've suffered during previous economic shocks. And I think that my officers up in Northumberland ran some numbers off for me the other day, and in the North of Tyne, I think for October we were experiencing around about 5% unemployment, which is around about 26,000 people or so, down progressively over previous months. So whatever we're doing, we are making some impact here, undoubtedly. And the report quite rightly talks about safeguarding jobs, but there's huge amounts that will be coming in our direction in terms of opportunities, whether it's projects that have been helped by the cabinet here, whether it's been in Northumberland, just as an example, JDR, British Vault, others. I look at that and I see around about 8,000 jobs in terms of supply chain, in addition to what's going to actually happen in those core builds from those companies. And hopefully, before too long, we'll be worrying about how we're going to fill all these jobs with the amount of people that we have available to take them on. And that's ultimately where these schemes hopefully will be getting us into a phenomenal place, a great advert for devolution. And if we can tackle through the previous report that we've had from Lee about making sure that people are skilled up and ready to jump on those opportunities, then it'll be not job done, but it'll be very much significant in terms of the progress that we would have made. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I mean, that's a really positive contribution. The fact that, I can't remember the last time unemployment in the North of Tyne was down to the national average. Now, it's not something that we should regard as job done, of course, but isn't that remarkable? And that's the work of our constituent authorities, our anchor institutions, our universities, our private sector, and of course the thousands of jobs we're helping to create with the North of Tyne. So it really is a collaborative effort. And I've got to say, from day one, since I walked into the office of Mayor, everybody has been supportive in this agenda. It's been absolutely wonderful to achieve this. And let's get beyond that. I don't believe in levelling up. I believe in levelling beyond. You know, we want unemployment below the national average with wages above the national average. That's where we've got to get to. And there's some things in here, but I see Councillor Forbes. Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. And just to add to your comments and to pick on a number of the really important points that Peter raised in that excellent introduction. Of course, we're focusing on creating jobs, but we know that creating jobs doesn't necessarily happen in a way that matches the residual skill base of our population, which is why the previous report around the adult education budget is so critical, because that's demonstrating that we're bridging the gap between where people are, where people need to be in the future, and the job opportunities that the Combined Authority is helping to create. So I think there's a really powerful story about not just investing in the economy, but investing in people here. The couple of things I wanted to just particularly comment on in the report, and there's a huge amount in here, again, of which we should be immensely proud. Firstly, obviously, you and I were both speaking at the launch this morning of the Green New Deal Fund, and I think that's going to be a real game changer in making this the place to be for low-carbon, net-zero technologies. And if we can use a relatively significant investment fund to stimulate growth in a whole range of SMEs, that in itself sparks wider interest in investment across a wider range of initiatives and projects, and that in itself starts to increase the gravitational pull, both in terms of the long-term investment that we need, but also in terms of the jobs that we can create here. So I thought it was a really successful event this morning, and I think really puts us on the map, particularly relevant, of course, post-COP26, when we know that we are in competition with other places around the world to be world leading. But I genuinely think we have something very exciting here, and hopefully that Green New Deal Fund will help us to consolidate and drive it forward. And the other thing I just wanted to make passing reference to, which is again extremely welcome in this report, is the North Tyne Events Programme. Because we know that it's not just about jobs and workplaces and employment statistics, it's about making this a great place to live as well, with exciting things that happen. And the way that we can help is by supporting bigger events than each of our constituent authorities could put on by ourselves, and really making the most of the visitor economy, helping to, for example, if people are coming here for a weekend, stretch that so that there's more to offer so they stay for a long weekend. Thinking about the kind of events that we can bring in that play to our strengths, both as cultural and a sporting region. And the budget that we have for that kind of 3-year programme of events, I think is shaping up to be very exciting, and I know is integral, not just to our promotion as a place, but also to our economic recovery plans, because one of the ways in which we're going to be able to build confidence is by getting people to come and enjoy events in a safe environment again, and there's real commitment in this report to that. I didn't want the occasion to pass without specifically drawing attention to what we're doing around the quality of life as well as the quality of work issues.
I mean, that is such a good point, isn't it? You know, we're talking about attracting people here, keeping people here because there's work, keeping people here because it's a fantastic place to live. The Green New Deal Fund, now, everybody globally is now realising that this is something we've got to deal with. But people often focus on the big ticket items, you know, the multi-gigawatt wind farms, the huge gigafactories. These are very important, and we're leading the way in these in the North of Tyne, of course. But there's so many other things, the small projects. Because if you speak to an investment banker and you say, oh, I've got a project here for $1.5 million, they'll say, we're not interested. By the time we've got somebody to look at it and work it up, we want to be doing things that are in the tens and hundreds of millions. Now, we're involved in them as well. But there is so much innovation, so much opportunity, and that's what the Green New Deal Fund does. Now, it may be starting out as an £18 million fund, but I have some real confidence that this is going to be successful. And once we have the demonstration that these projects are working, that they are returning the money because it's a recyclable fund, that there will be a huge demand. And we are in early conversations with a number of other people about what might happen, should that happen, about scaling this up to a really game-changing initiative. And I think it's fair to say we are the first in this country to be doing this. So something else, very proud to do. We've only been here for, well, coming up to 3 years, and to be this advanced. But this speaks to another point in this report, the access to finance, which is again us taking our role as custodians of public money really seriously. Because we're spending the money, and the money's getting repaid, and then we'll spend it again, which is put in a very different place from branches of government, central governments, which have a habit, as I'm sure many people know, of announcing the same money over and over again. Well, what we're doing is we're announcing it once and spending it over and over again. So that's the North of Tyne way. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Thank you. Well, let's move to the recommendations. First of all, to note the progress, which I think we can all agree. I don't need to read that in detail. Note the launch of the Green New Deal Fund and approve the next steps of the £15 million Access to Finance programme, including the objectives set out in the report and the proposals to start formal engagement with potential delivery partners. They're all listed in detail in the report, and I can see lots of nods on that. Thank you. Approve the additional funding of £1 million for the North of Tyne Events programme, as Councillor Forbes spoke to, develop the pipeline for post-2023 and establish an events scale-up programme to develop the existing pipeline using the existing events programme arrangements. And I can see lots of nods there. Thank you, and a thumbs up. And to authorise the Managing Director to finalise the conditions as described in that final recommendation. And I can see lots of nods there. Thank you very much. Great. Well, let's move on to the Good Work Pledge. And I'll not attempt to steal anybody's thunder and hand straight over to Karen.
Thank you, Chair. So we're returning to a great place to work theme. We've all experienced times in our lives when work wasn't what we might describe as good. It's different for us all, but the basics are you know what you're doing and why, how you fit in, and how you're a key part of that work programme. You have some control, you feel listened to and respected. And you're paid enough to have the dignity of living outside of poverty. We've expressed these attributes of good work in our pillars of the Good Work Pledge, and organisations of all kinds are signing up, not because they're being virtuous, but because they recognise that, put simply, you get better work done if it's good work. And where I see lower levels of productivity in our region, it really saddens me, because the happier teams are, the more productive they are, and you won't persuade me that high levels of child poverty aren't related to low levels of productivity. And yes, of course, productivity is related to R&D, innovation and investment. But more than that, it's related to how people feel about their work. History is littered with examples of how companies and public sector organisations have failed or made mistakes simply because they didn't listen to their workforce. So we're promoting the Good Work Pledge because it's the right thing to do for people, for our economy and for our recovery. The Good Work Pledge is one of the best ways of designing an economic recovery that's robust and puts the North of Tyne ahead of the game rather than behind the curve. And we have, in less than a year and in the middle of a pandemic, signed up over 39 organisations with a further 22 in progress, and it's rising every week. Over the last year, we've prepared for mass engagement. With more efficient systems, we've developed the software to manage the applications, and we're creating a customer relationship management system. We have a vibrant social media communications campaign with a current reach of over 100,000 people. And in the last month alone, 14,000 businesses have accessed information, and I'm hopeful they'll all sign up. And of course, all three of our local authorities and the Combined Authority itself have been awarded an Advanced Award of the Pledge, leading by example. As awareness raising continues, our thanks go to the North East England Chamber of Commerce, the Advisory Conciliation and Arbitration Service, and the Federation of Small Businesses. These contacts are providing access to thousands of businesses and organisations contained in their memberships, and as you'll read in the report, so much is planned for 2022. The principle of the Good Work Pledge is simple. Treat others as you'd like to be treated. It doesn't mean treating everyone the same, as we all have different drivers and emotional and professional needs, but the principle of do as you would be done by is a very good starting point. Everywhere I go, I try to mention the pledge, and I ask other colleagues to do the same. If we promote and sell it, we can build a platform that can change the way we do business around here, drive productivity up and poverty down. It's the only way to go. I recommend the report to Cabinet. Chair.
Thank you very much, Karen. Would anybody else like to make a comment or a question on this report? So the only thing I would like to say, first of all, is a terrific... thank you. Richard, go for it. I didn't see your hand there.
No report should go without some comment. Happy to chime in, and thank you very much for the report. It's really nice to hear you talk with such passion. And as someone who's built teams and had my own company and so on, it's vital that you have a positive environment. Sometimes that doesn't always exist, and it's challenging, and you have to find ways through it as quickly as practical in order to get to a better place. Fundamental to it, of course, is to actually have a proper wage and respect in terms of what you're expecting people to do, and making sure that you're communicating that in a proper way. fundamentally, who could argue with any of that? So I would implore as many businesses as possible across Northumberland, North Tyneside and Newcastle to get signed up and transfer. How many was it? 14,000 or 12,000 or so? So let's transition as many of those as possible quickly into getting to the next stage. And anything that we can do from Northumberland County Council, give us a shout and we'll push it as much as we can. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Robin.
So, Richard, I always feel like I'm just copying you by putting my hand up. Yeah, as a charity that has recently just undergone the assessment and has achieved 2 of the 5 pillars so far, found it a really useful process. And again, just wondering what Voda and our equivalents could do to promote the scheme more to the voluntary sector. I guess whilst acknowledging the uncertainties of working in the sector, make a few of the elements a little bit trickier. But yeah, more than happy to maybe think about using our social media, e-bulletins to the sector, maybe just to do another push to try and get a few more sign-ups, because yeah, great programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Peter.
I work as an HR professional, and I can tell you that the HR textbooks will tell you that the value of meaningful work for employees, the value of good leadership and investment in skills and training is really fundamental to any successful organisation. And I think that's really what is at the heart of this Good Work Pledge, and the fact that we are rolling it out and starting to make a real difference across the North East region in promoting a good standard of work, a good standard of employment is absolutely fantastic. And I'm sure we've still got a long way to go with this, but there's been an encouraging take-up by a number of large employers already. So I think more power to our elbow in rolling this out and progressing it further.
Thank you, Peter. Heartily agree. And Richard, would you like to?
Thank you. I guess one question I'm just curious of, and I don't need an answer now, but I would be really interested to learn how we might reflect what's happening with COVID into this, because it's the biggest shock to the workplace probably that any of us will experience in all of our lives. And I often feel terribly frustrated and worried for the generation that's coming through now. If I think back to being a young engineer coming into a company, the way that I learnt was that I would listen to that guy that was over the other side of the partition who had an incredibly loud voice, and I would have learnt virtually everything that he was doing in the day, and there was a few of them. But it's that kind of stuff that just isn't going to be there. It's those, we're very fortunate to be sat in here, and many of us may go to wherever and have a chat or a coffee at the end of this and have that back and forth. And I think that companies and organisations really need to be thinking about how they're dealing with some of the needs in terms of development needs, but the psychological needs that go with that. And if I'd be fascinated at some stage, but not now, to understand what we might be able to project into that and how we could help people to bring something forward that would make a positive difference to people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I mean, that's a very accurate observation. Work, of course, changes, has changed and will continue to change. Karen, would you like to address some of that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, but I think that's a really, really important point. And I think if COVID has brought any benefits, it's shown far more employers that flexibility around work patterns, if nothing else, is doable and is realistic and achievable, and actually it's beneficial to their workforce, and their workforce will be just as productive, if not more productive, because they've got that flexibility to manage their own outside of work life as well. But you're absolutely right, there is a flip side to that, and it's about learning and training, but it's also that kind of social support and that social network that it's harder to maintain, I think. And I think what a lot of staff teams, where they're already strong, they've been able to maintain that during COVID. I think what's really difficult is exactly what you've just described, somebody new coming into an organisation. We had an example here of a member of staff who'd actually been here for well over a year and had not yet met a lot of the people that he interacted with on screen on a regular basis. So I think you're absolutely right. I think there is a piece of work to be done to look at what the benefits but also the disadvantages are of some of that remote working and that kind of hybrid approach that I think a lot of employers are looking at currently, and I'm sure that's something we'll be looking at in the future. But I think a really important point, Richard.
Thank you. I mean, anecdotally, rather than statistically, I know of cases where employers in our region that we're working with have brought people in, and then through COVID have now changed to a physical in the office 3 weeks onboarding period because they found people were just not adopting the culture and frequently moving on. And the other side of it, one of the few things perhaps that there's a benefit out of COVID, it was often the case, not universally, but often the case, that senior people in organisations were allowed to work flexibly or work from home. But the more junior you were, somehow you weren't trusted to do that. And it is nice to see that that has shifted, that mindset. I just want to say a couple of points on the Good Work Pledge. It's not the case that this is simply something about, business, you must behave better. It's absolutely not. If we look at the changes in labour markets, labour patterns at the moment, there's phrases used such as the Great Resignation. There are large numbers of vacancies. There are mismatches between skills. People are struggling to retain people. And perhaps more than in a long, long time, working people have a greater degree of choice. They still don't have absolute choice by any sense, but a greater degree of choice of where they're going to work. And signing up for our Good Work Pledge is going to help businesses. It's a really well-researched set of indicators that say, yes, this is genuinely a good place to work. It's not just a badge. It will help people with their environmental and social governance. It will help them with their social value because it gives an accredited mark that people can start to use, which will certainly help with the VCSE sector in terms of raising the bar in terms of how contracts are procured. And I just want to say a well done to the team, and particularly Caroline, who is the ambassador for this, because the amount of award ceremonies and people I've spoken to where, so I've been to the North East Business Awards, Asian Business Connections, the Dynamites, lots of others, where I'm giving speeches. And, late in the night, I'll see her making notes. And she says, what's that? She says, that's my hit list. These are all the companies I'm going to go and speak to. So we are rolling this out. And perhaps when we talk about the number of companies, it doesn't quite convey the scale of this. Over 20,000 people are already covered by our Good Work Pledge. That's a lot of people. So this is starting to create this expectation that if you want to do business here, look after your people and they'll look after you. So in terms of recommendations, this is just to note the progress that's been made and endorse the plans for year 2. And I can see lots of nods and thumbs there. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to the quarterly budget monitoring report. So I'll hand straight over to Janice, our Financial Director.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is the second quarter monitoring report for the Combined Authority. I won't go through it in a raft of detail because clearly, hopefully, you'll have been able to read the report. And obviously, reports in the earlier part of the agenda actually reflect on the actual delivery on the ground and real aspects of where the action's happening, if you like. That is then reflected in the financial aspects of the report. Just a couple of things I will highlight in terms of the corporate budget. The key variations you see there are in respect of staffing. So additional staffing brought in, absolutely funded directly through the investment fund. And that's a reflection of the capacity required appropriately to deliver against the various programmes that Cabinet have already approved and deliver on the ambition that's set out in the plans that Cabinet have approved. And then, as you would expect, we not only think about in-year monitoring, but as part of that, thinking about the things ahead and planning for the future. So included in this stage is a recognition that we will need to begin to set aside funding for future mayoral election. on the assumption that at this stage we are unclear that the mayoral capacity fund will continue beyond this year. So the 600,000 that you see in the report is about just beginning to set aside provision for future election costs. Other than that, we continue to report on the investment fund delivery. Clearly challenges around getting cash out the door, but working very hard to do that against the plans. Adult education budget, Lee's already talked an awful lot about that, and brownfield land that continues to deliver this year in accordance with the amended profile. As part of this report, there is a Treasury Management update, as you would expect at the 6 months position. No particular issues to report to yourselves other than interest rates remain incredibly low. It costs us to put money out there, so we need to get it out of the door rather than sitting costing us money, which the teams are absolutely focused on. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Janice. Yeah, the report has everything there in a great deal of detail. So I can't see anyone indicating to ask any questions. Thank you. So the recommendation is to note the forecast and the position as set out in paragraphs 1.2 through to 1.6 and the reserves position in paragraph 1.7 of the report. And I can see nods and thumbs up on that. Thank you very much, Janice. So let's go back to Janice to take item 10. The budget proposals for 22 to 26.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, the report, this time of year, standard report in terms of the Mayor and Cabinet's initial draft budget proposals. So again, set out across the corporate position, the investment fund, the adult education budget and the brownfield land. Included in the report is a picture of the Tyne-and-Wear transport levies, but again, that's just an in and an out as we process that cash as is required. And then an update on the levels of reserves that I have consideration for at this stage to maintain the position. A little bit different to that in our constituent authorities, so not as significant an issue. Nevertheless, I do keep an eye to risk and do keep an eye to the level of reserves that we need to have. Included in the papers is a picture of the accountable body budget that we have to deliver our role for the LEP. That's set out in paragraph 2.6. And again, Mayor, happy to take any specific questions.
Thank you, Janice. If as a non-accountant, but someone with business experience, if you can allow me to summarise this as basically saying the corporate budget takes account of inflation. We don't know what inflation is going to be. We don't know what interest rates are going to be, but it's certainly prudent to put this out, and that's pretty much the trajectory. So unless anybody has any questions or comments on that, no. Thank you. So the Cabinet's there's a few recommendations here. So to agree the draft corporate budget, excuse me, as set out in paragraph 2.1. Now that will then, of course, be subject to consultation with the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I can see nods on that. Thank you. Agree the draft investment fund as set out in paragraph 2.2, which will also, of course, be subject to consultation with the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. See nods on that. And the draft adult education budget in paragraph 2.3, likewise. Can see that. Does anybody object to any of this? Is that the easiest way to do it? For the record, I will read them out. Agree the brownfield land programme budget as in paragraph 2.4. Can see nods. Note the Tyne-and-Wear levies. They are obviously a matter for noting, as Janice says, they are the money in straight out. We don't set those budgets. Agree to hold reserves as set out in paragraph 2.5 and note that the Chief Financial Officer continues to keep the level of resources and reserves under review. That's agreed. And to note the North East LEP accountable body budget, which is in paragraph 2.6. Thank you. Although it's perhaps a little bit dry, it is important when we're spending public money to do these things formally. Item number 11 takes us to the North of Tyne Combined Authority borrowing powers and debt cap agreement. This is quite an interesting report. Janice.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Hopefully Cabinet will recall that when or may not, but for those who do, when the authority was created, we just missed the deadline to be included in the regulations back in 2018 to secure borrowing powers outside of transport activities. And we've been on a bit of a journey for since becoming live as an authority to secure those borrowing powers. And I'm pleased to say, although it's come as a bit of a rush at the end, that we are now on the list to hopefully be included in the regulations that are proposed to be set in place by the end of January next year, January 22. So this report is really about authorising the completion of an agreement whereby there'll be a cap that is set on the level of borrowing for this current financial year to allow us to be in the regulations and approved, because ironically the cap that we will be asking for this year will be zero, but allows us to be included in the regulations. And what that will mean is subsequently we'll be able to negotiate with Treasury a cap for future years. It also therefore asks them to consent to making of the regulations, which we are absolutely expecting to be a mirror version of those regulations that are already in place from 2018, and just a delegation that allows us to continue with the work to get these put in place.
Thank you. I'm sure everybody understands the process that has to be gone through, but I just love the fact that we have to agree to borrow no money. So let's go through straight to the recommendations. To authorise the completion of an agreement with central government to maximum borrowing cap of no money, nil, that's agreed. But that does, of course, move on to point 2, consent to the making of the necessary regulations by central government, which is, I can see, is agreed, because this paves the way for the future should we choose. And we've no such decision at the moment, should we choose to use those powers. And to authorise the Managing Director, Chief Finance Officer and Monitoring Officer in consultation with the Mayor to take the necessary steps to give effect to those recommendations. Now, again, I can see lots of nods there. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Well, that takes us on to some board membership appointments. Next item, item 12, hand over to John Softley, the Monitoring Officer.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a very straightforward report to agree the appointments to the Housing and Land Board as set out in paragraph 1.2 of the report, and then to delegate authority to the Managing Director to agree in-year changes in the future.
Thank you, John. Just for the benefit of anybody watching at home who doesn't have the documentation, this is for the North of Tyne Housing and Land Board, which is one of our advisory boards. That was, as discussed in the earlier report on future high streets. And that's Councillor Colin Horncastle to replace Councillor Nick Oliver as Northumberland County Council's representative. Dominic Smith, who's Senior Land Manager at Barratt Homes, will be the new representative for the Home Builders Federation, replacing Peter Jordan. And Tom Warburton, the Interim Chief Exec at Newcastle City Council, who's with us today. Hi, Tom. Replacing Pat Ritchie as the Lead Constituent Authority Chief Exec for Housing. So Cabinet's recommended to agree those in-year Housing and Land Board appointments as I've just detailed. And I can see lots of nods around there. And to delegate the authority to the Managing Director in conjunction with the Housing and Land Board Chair, which is Mayor Redfern, to make the necessary changes, which is all agreed. Thank you. So the next one is the nomination of the Chair of our Inclusive Economy Board.
Thank you, Mayor. This is to recommend the appointment of Baroness Tanny Gray Thompson as Chair of the Inclusive Economy Board, which, as you said before, Mayor, is an advisory board to the North of Tyne Combined Authority. And this follows the retirement of Bishop Christine Hardman.
Thank you. And just by way of explanation, Bishop Christine agreed to chair our Inclusive Economy Board. She was absolutely superb. She put energy into it, she was inclusive, she brought people in, she had great ideas, and she drove things forward with a passion. The only reason she has stepped down is it's a quirk of the way the Church of England works, that because she was retiring as a bishop, she actually has to leave the region. Otherwise, because she enjoyed and put so much energy into the board, I'm sure she would have liked to have continued. So I just want to say a formal thank you to Bishop Christine. She was absolutely superb to work with, and I know so many other people have found that. And she was so fulsome in her praise of the North of Tyne staff team. Fortunately, we have a replacement who, in her own way, will be equally, I'm sure, fantastic. So when we first found out this might be possible, I spoke to Baroness Tanni Gray-Thompson. We had a good call. She spoke to various members of the staff team and other people on the board. She's now attended one of our boards informally, because this appointment has to be made by Cabinet. And I would like to recommend that Baroness Tanni Gray-Thompson be chair of the Inclusive Economy Board. And I can see some very positive nods there. So just in case you're watching, welcome aboard, Tanni. So this moves us on to the North East Local Enterprise Partnership Funding Decisions Update. This is because we are the accountable body for the North East LEP, not because we make all the decisions for them. Janice.
Yes, Chair, this is a standard report that comes through to Cabinet that sets out all the funding decisions made at the LEP over the last quarter, a substantial list. I'm present at the investment panel and certainly at the LEP board, so from an accountable body position, comfortable with all the decisions that have been made. So it's for information more than anything else, Chair.
Thank you very much, Janice. There's a question.
It's not a question, Mayor. It's just that I hadn't realised that the Advanced Northumberland thing was on there, just to declare that I'm a director of Advanced Northumberland, just for the record.
Thank you. Yeah, the monitoring officer's nodding there. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, John. Can I invite Lucy to speak, who is chair of the LAP?
Just can't let the opportunity go without thanking Janice and the team for the ongoing tremendous support that they give to us in attendance and advice and common sense. And as you see from the report, something you touched on earlier, or someone touched on, get the money in and get it out quickly to the right places. And Janice and the team work very hard to make that happen. So many thanks on behalf of the LEP board.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you very much. For the benefit of anyone who's interested, all of the information is detailed in the report. It's quite extensive. I don't propose to read it out, but it is there for the public record. So let's move straight on to the recommendation to note the report, which provides information on the work and funding decisions of the North East LEP over the last 4 months. And we're happy to note that, I can see from people's responses. Well, thank you, everybody. We've covered a lot today. The date and time of the next meeting, it's scheduled for 2 p.m. on the 25th of January next year, 2022. So if there's anybody I don't see between now and then, please have a very happy Christmas. Bye-bye.